Hello, this is James Barkell.
And it is wonderful to have your company here on the centre court.
You are listening to the Coach Doctor podcast.
Strikes it beautifully and it's down the middle.
In this podcast series, we discuss all things coaching and sports science.
Beats one, beats a couple, still going.
Each episode will feature prominent coaches on the front line of their sport.
Across to Mbappe.
As well as some of the world's leading university academics who research what it takes to get the W.
All Blacks under big pressure again.
If there is an aspect of your coaching that needs some assistance, you can always count on the Coach Doctor to add life to your program.
Browning's having a terrific run. The first three to qualify. You betcha!
Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Coach Doctor podcast. In this episode I chat with Jack Rolfe, who is the owner of the Coaching Lab, a business that aims to provide coaches at all levels with tools and resources to improve their coaching, especially within games. One of the resources the Coaching Lab offers are MatchPlay cards, a set of cards with a variety of both team and individual challenges that you can apply to coaching in game settings. We discuss a few examples of how they may be utilised in the training environment. Another cool resource is a set of reflection cards that contain open-ended questions that engage the athletes and develop a deeper thought process in the reflection period. Again, we will discuss specific examples of how to use these. During this chat, Jack provides some really helpful examples of how you can develop a dynamic and exciting learning environment for your athletes, whether it be at the grassroots level or at the elite level. I'll provide links to find Jack and the Coaching Lab in the show notes. Meanwhile, I hope you enjoy this podcast. G'day Jack, how are you, mate?
Awesome, thanks for having me, James.
No.
Thanks for the invite, and it's cool to be on the bill with Shane Peel and then Jack Rolfe. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. They're up with some highly esteemed people in the coaching industry, mate. So well done.
I'm just holding them up. Yeah, I'll just sit at the back.
And just quickly, Jack, where are you today? You're over in WA.
Yeah, in the most isolated city in the world, literally at the moment, in Perth, Western Australia.
Good stuff, mate. Jack, you've completed a Bachelor of Coaching Science at Christchurch University. Where did you develop an interest in coaching?
Probably for a struggle with education, I suppose. Being a major dyslexic, sport was always a release for me. I never intended to be a coach, never intended to own a coaching business or travel the world coaching. I think like most 16, 17-year-olds, you have aspirations to play for your country, and my country's the UK. So when I was 16, 17, I was in and around kind of some England age group development squad selection tournaments, all this sort of stuff. And I think it was at under 18s, 9 of my mates out of the squad of 18 went on to play for England. And I was one of the 9 that didn't. And my coach said, Jack, do you fancy coming to do some coaching? So that was probably my first experience of coaching at that 17, 18. And I'll be honest, James, it's because there's a bit of cash in it for some summer holidays. And, I still think coaching is probably looked at degraded compared to other industries. It's just seen as a bit of a side hustle. So I probably wasn't aware of the amazing world that goes on inside it. And year on year, week on week that I spend time in this environment, I learned just what an amazing job and opportunity it is.
So when you were playing hockey and you started doing some coaching, I guess at that stage you were getting into like youth coaching initially, and you developed that sort of passion from that youth level. Is that correct?
Yeah, my mum and dad were really keen that I went back to my old primary school to help out, which was kind of 10 minutes down the road. So I used to finish school on a Wednesday at senior school and then walk down to my old school that finished a little bit later. And I'd just take a session for 45 minutes, an hour, and the senior teacher would help me out. I look back now, it's probably some of the worst hockey coaching I've ever done, or worst coaching I've ever done. It was pretty lines, laps and lectures, but at 16 you don't really know any different.
No, you don't, and you've got to start somewhere. So you did this, you did your Bachelor of Coaching Science at Christchurch. Was that something that helped then shape your philosophies and your, I guess, coaching pedagogies?
Yeah, massively. And the best bit about that was I worked or coached, I suppose, all the way along my degree. So I do a lecture in the morning at 9 o'clock, and then I'll go and work at a nice Hogwarts style private school in the UK in the afternoon. So I could always put the lecture that I did in the morning into practice in the afternoon, and got to work with a great mentor in Nick Clark, who had spent time in New Zealand, had spent time involved in an England hockey senior age group and junior age groups all the way through, and was a real mentor for me. So I could really take that learning that I would see on paper in those 2-hour, far too long lectures, and then suddenly go and put that into action. And you learn by doing and learn through shared experiences, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And is this where the coaching idea or the coaching lab, the idea for the coaching lab came from?
Yeah, I suppose a little bit later into that journey of university, and the coaching lab started in my university library when I was doing my final year dissertation, and there was 15,000 words of sports psychology down on this A4 document, and I thought, okay, this is really good research and it's meaningful, but how can it be impactful? And the coaching lab grew from that research to then build the product we got in terms of MatchPlay cards. So yeah, massively influenced by the experiences I've had at university, just to connect theory to practice, because I don't believe it's probably done enough, or I say it's done, but I don't believe it's digestible enough for grassroots coaches.
Yeah, there's a definite lag between the scientific research and the access by practitioners. As coaches, we tend to mimic previous coaches we might have had, or professional coaches we see in the media, and slowly develop our own style. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting that the world's changed a lot, but the way you write a journal probably hasn't changed, which backs up your point of it probably is quite in the dark age in a way. It's imagine, of course, I understand that you have to have some formalities, but if that research was presented in an infograph or was presented via some videos within the PDF file that you download, it'd be a lot more meaningful. And I would almost suggest that when you write a journal article or a piece of research, I think there probably has to be a bit on the bottom of your top 3 tips for coaches to impact to bring this to life.
Yeah,
of course, you see that sometimes in the inclusion or the conclusion, but it takes you ages to go and find it, look through it, and digest it. Whereas if there was here's our top 5 tips of how you take this research to impactful into your group.
Yeah, a lot of the journals now have a practical application section. However, I really like your idea of providing links to videos which might provide a clearer picture for coaches at all levels to use. One of the big parts of the coaching lab are the MatchPlay cards. They're a resource that coaches can get from you guys at the coaching lab. Can you explain how you use these both from an individual perspective and a team perspective?
Yeah, so I suppose the context is we want to remove the question of when are we going to play a game, which is arguably the most asked question of every single coach at senior level and junior performance and grassroots across all the levels. And if we look at why kids play or players start their engagement in sport, is to play the game. So ultimately we want to support coaches to coach through games and create an experience that players are learning through their experiences and learning through their movements and their decisions, but helping the coach in a way to add some team challenges in. So team challenges that connect with still the session focus or the group that you've got in front of you, and then looking at some individual challenges in that as well. I'm a big believer that we probably don't develop the individual enough within a team. We're often very team focused, but don't look at the individual enough. So a whole set of cards that are totally multi-sport to coach through games. And I suppose the posh word is constraints-led approach, if we're talking theory. And then to help that go through games. So team challenges and player challenges. And importantly, maybe some of the most important stuff is capturing that learning with a deck of reflection MatchPlay cards that we've also created.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the reflection cards. Is there another resource you guys have developed? Again, this is a great idea to get some meaningful feedback. Can you provide a bit more of an explanation of how these might be utilised in training?
Yes, we designed 50 open questions that are for coaches as well as players. It might be that we put them into half-time team talks, could be a prime example. So we might say defenders get together, midfielders get together, and attackers get together. So you create 3 small groups. And you might say, okay, here's a card per group, and the coach would choose the card that is relevant, or the question that's relevant to that line of players. You give them a couple of minutes, and then their job is to share that feedback back to the rest of the group. But importantly, always doing it in the middle and not always at the end, because the real best decision makers or the reflection is not in what you say, but is actually what you go and do next.
Yeah.
So we play a lot of games that are 5 times or 3 times 5 minutes. So there's always a couple of minutes in between each third. So to have a couple of reflection cards, that could be peer-to-peer questions. So 1 card per group. It might just be 1 card per team if you was playing a small-sided game, and you could even have some shared team huddles within that as well. So you might say, James, your team's got to come and listen to Jack's team and their reflections and their questions and have that as a shared experience.
Okay, and would you tend to select a card to use purposefully, or would you say just assign them random cards, or could you do like a mixture of both depending on what the requirement is of the session?
Yeah, it's probably the illusion that it's random, but actually the coach still needs to coach. And that's one of the biggest misconceptions of the games-based approach, is that if they're playing a game, they must be learning and coaches can go and grab a coffee. Whereas actually we want the coaches to use the cards, and teachers to use the cards that connect with the theme or the principle of the topic that's going on, and then work backwards with that. So if we said, today we're looking at attacking in the front half, or we're looking at passing or counter-attack, whatever it may be, we would then decide questions and cards that reflect to that, but importantly, looking at the individuals within that group as well.
Mate, you were a hockey player initially and moved into coaching hockey, obviously, but a lot of your resource and a lot of the match play cards, for example, can be utilised in many invasion sports like AFL, football, basketball. Did you develop these initially for hockey or for a certain sport, or just have all different invasion games in mind?
Probably all invasion games. Ultimately, they're the same. That you have a target at one end and a target at another end, and you need to stop the other team from going forward and go forward quicker and faster in the most direct way than the opposition, and ultimately score more goals. So I think the principles are very much similar. Coming from the UK, soccer is massive, football's huge, and a lot of my work was within football. So naturally, a little bit has come from that and that experience, a little bit from hockey, but footy as well, netball, all those big invasion sports. It's ultimately people playing the sport and not the player playing the sport. So definitely a shared principle-based approach across all of those major invasion games.
Yeah, great. Just another thing I just thought of, Jack, is when you're coaching, do you explain to players the reasons why you might be tending to use games more so than that traditional drill practice? Do you think it's important for players or the athletes to understand why games are being utilised more so than those traditional practices?
It's a great question, and one that I probably only reflected on recently after I coached a group of coached a team in Perth for the first time. And when an Englishman comes to Australia, you're always going to get a bit of criticism, I suppose. But I'm a very heavily based games-based coach, and the player review at the end said, we didn't do any fitness and we never did any skills. And I always find player reviews quite interesting. And I got my notebook out and I said we played 2v2 over a bigger field with shorter gaps in the middle between each repetition, so you could get fitness into it. And I said this was the constraint that we added in, so there was a technical focus to it, or an execution of the technical skill. And then they said, okay, that makes sense. But my reflection then as a coach was, I didn't tell the group that, and I should have been fairly explicit. This is why we're doing it, and this is what we want to see as a reflection from that.
Yeah, because it's one of the things I sort of find is that if we do come in with a games-based approach, a lot of the time I feel like the players look at me afterwards and think we're not doing enough drills, or we're not doing enough fitness, or, like you said. And I think to myself, maybe I should be explaining the reasoning why we're using a games-based approach over traditional practices more often, and what the reasoning and what the transfer of skills from that games-based approach compared to those traditional skills, or closed skills sort of approach. So
I think it's not just players either. I think it's probably the key stakeholders would be my other reflection, and that includes parents. So it's telling parents, why are you using games over another type of coaching, or not over another type, but maybe more than another type of coaching, because parents would also look and think, they're playing a game, so they're maybe not learning as much. And then also those kind of high performance managers that often think coaching is, and hockey's maybe one of the biggest culprits of it, is running around tires and doing some technical skill, with every form of cone going. And using games is probably seen as quite a soft approach to coaching, in a way.
Yeah. Do you find that there's still a place for those closed skills practices?
Of course, but I'd still make it a game.
Yeah.
With everything under a time pressure.
Yeah.
If I had one technical skill going one end, I'd always have another going the other end. And I might say, okay, it's the first to 10 or the first to 5. I go and watch the West Coast Eagles train yesterday, and they did a couple of patterns and this and that, but it was always on a clock. So there was always a set amount. How many can you do within 60 seconds?
Okay.
Can you beat the other team to 3 goals? So there was always some game element to it, or the feel of a game.
Yeah, okay. No, interesting. Mate, I'm going to give you a couple of examples of some of the cards or the match play cards that you've got in your pack. And can you give, I guess, let the listeners know how you'd apply these in a coaching situation and potentially what the focus of the learning would be? Gear change. So switch it up and only use your weak side to get a shot away.
Yeah, so I believe players need to have an incentive. This is what probably I'd call within a game. So it might be that I set this as a secret challenge for one player that is really good on their right side, which might be their strong side, but need a bit of support to effectively make 2 really strong sides, but they need an incentive to go and do it. So I might tell that player or give that player the card, but I might not tell anybody else. So if they're really successful, we might shout really loud and proud about it. But if they're struggling with it a little bit and they need a bit more support, no one else knows.
Yeah.
So it's stretching and supporting at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'll ask the opposition, what did you notice about player X that also had this card as well?
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea. I like the idea of initially keeping it, it's that nobody else knows what that player's got. And if they succeed and do really well at that challenge, then you applaud it and to the rest of the group. And, if they're really struggling with it, then, you can keep that remaining secret and I guess, slowly develop that with the player continuously. So really good idea. The other one I thought was really a really good one, especially for our COVID period, is lockdown. Players cannot move out of the current playing zone they are in.
Yeah, I was almost predicting the future there, wasn't I, when I designed those 3 years ago. I think probably from soccer, in terms of understanding positions, in terms of what I'd call pitch geography. So actually you might play football in an 11v11 field, but in the top left-hand corner, it might just be a 2v1. So just developing that player's ability to play in that area and restricting them and constraining them to play that game in there. So it might have to be their change of movement. It might be that if they can't run out of that area, they need to win the ball back quicker if they do lose it in that area. So there's always an incentive to go and engage and do something with it.
Okay. And would you say that one would be more of a team focused one, or could you do either team focused or individual focused as well?
Yeah, good question. Probably a little bit of both. And maybe one of the reasons that we didn't put team and individual challenge on the back of the cards, because we want the coach to coach. So you might see that card and think, okay, I can use that for a team, or I might use it for 5 players, or I might just use it for 1 player. So it very much depends on who's in front of you and what they're up to.
Yeah, nice. Next one is golden ticket. Select one player that cannot be tackled by another outfield player.
Develop confidence. The job of the coach is develop confidence in a player. So a particular grassroots setting, a new player comes in, and let's take rugby, for example, it's pretty crazy. Everyone's getting big tackles and this new guy rocks up. It just gives them 5-10 seconds, and that's the role of the coach. You might say, okay, you can't be tackled for the next 5 seconds. So it gives them a bit of confidence. It gives them the time and the space to look up, but also ask something different of the opposition as well, because they probably need to mark off the ball as well as on the ball.
Yeah, no, nice. So there are a few examples of the match play cards, and an example of a reflection card is, and I really like this one, what have you recognized from your surroundings that may influence your decision making?
So a couple of examples, I suppose with all the reflection cards, we would, as we said, peer-to-peer or group, but for teachers and sometimes coaches, if you've got your coaching board, we'd often put a card in the middle. And as players leave the session, they just write a closing note as their reflection, and the coach would then just take a picture of that. And week 1 compared to week 7 might be very different. So that card might be used within a new environment, or even post-game. or even at half time? So what did he recognise that will help your decision making? So taking that previous learning, but importantly, influencing what happens next.
Yeah. Okay. So I think, again, it's a great example of an open-ended question. You just sort of explained when you might use it. What are you hoping the players would develop from answering that question, whether it be within the session or after the session? That one specifically, what have they recognised in their surroundings? What do you think is something that you'd want to hear, or hoping that the players would identify?
I hope I suppose for the coach, I hope they have better feedback. So ultimately, the responses that a player gives is feedback for the coach. So I hope they don't give me the answer that I'm always expecting, because I want something different. So I want their solutions and I want their experiences to come to me. Also for the players to understand that using their past experiences to support their future decisions. Often I feel we just go in rotation, and actually how much learning is happening. So what I really hope is they can listen or hear somebody else and think, okay, I understand that. Or they've had an experience that becomes a bit of an anchor for them, and they can use that and think, okay, this is where I'm going to go next. So not always giving me the answers, or bingo buzzword answers, I call them, of space or ball speed. There's real key answers that anybody could give you with their eyes shut, and just rock up and tell you. Yeah,
I tend to find that one of those typical answers is, we need to improve communication. So I noticed there's a couple of one or two of the cards in there is about, there's one where everybody has to call the name of the player with the ball before they're allowed to pass it. So basically everybody on the team has to communicate before they're allowed to play the ball on. And then there's some examples where I think there was nobody's allowed to talk. And I guess that's going to be showing them how important communication is. When you silence everyone, all of a sudden you realize the impact of silence on team performance. So, mate, you've come up with some really, really good cards in there. So I'm definitely gonna try and apply them to my rugby coaching in the near future. One of the phrases that you've got is "change the game," or it's one of your slogans. Can you unpack what this means? What do you mean by change the game?
I suppose there's a couple of different dynamics to it. If we look at a grassroots level, the grassroots game shouldn't look like the game that's on TV. It shouldn't be 15 versus 15 or 11 v 11 in training. So I suppose the element of change the game is change the game to fit the group that you're working with. So it's dynamic and it's an adaptable game. So adding some challenges in there, changing the pitch shape, supporting players to change the game as well. Ultimately, the coach can't always change the game. You know, I want 11 coaches on the field as well as 11 players. So I want players to have that ability to change the game. It's about having more problems or more solutions to problems. So that creativity element to it as well. Recognizing change, seeing change. And I think the best players are actually just the best decision makers and the best problem solvers. But they don't wait all the time for the coach to change the game. Actually, they're changing the game as they're going through it as well. But we need to give them the skills to do that, and the cards are based on that. Yeah, nice. Mate, I also noticed you've got a T-shirt that says creativity. Is that something from the coaching lab? It is, yeah. Nice. Yeah, so, brand. Yeah, good. So again, part of it, I heard you talk about developing creativity or promoting like a creative environment. So how important is that for a coach to develop that creativity? And is it, I think as a lot of coaches believe creativity is something that certain players have and certain players don't, and you can't develop or coach creativity. What's your ideas or thoughts on that? I don't believe you can have a preconceived idea of what creativity is. Creativity for Lionel Messi, who plays everywhere on the field, or everywhere, compared to a goalkeeper, is very different. So a coach can't go and say you have to do this, because that's constraining their creativity. So you might give them a framework or a platform to go from, an example, but then you give them the freedom. So I have a principle that if you do something once, it's never a mistake. If you do it 5 times, maybe it does become a mistake a little bit. The job of the coach is to ask the questions to foster that creativity. And to me, James, creativity is just having more solutions to problems.
Yeah.
And depends what way you go around that. So Apple products are a good example. They're exactly the same as Android, but a lot of people would say they're more creative, but they just solve different problems. In different ways. So two very similar products and companies, but they just solve it in different ways. So creativity is not the same for everybody. I believe everyone can have it, but the role of the coach is to create a space and inspire players to be creative.
Yeah, nice. I'm just going to go back to that idea of changing the game and discuss a model that the Belgian Football Association used after crashing out of the European Championships in the year 2000, where they were co-hosting the tournament. At that stage, the Belgian national team were ranked something like 66th in the world. They struggled to qualify for major tournaments, and if they did, they never went very far. After that European Championships in 2000, a coach named Chris van der Hagen overhauled the whole youth development model of Belgian football, and initially there was a big backlash because what he did was change youth football from large fields with a large number of players to 2 versus 2 on small fields in the under 6s, and then 3 versus 3 in the under 7s, and only 5 versus 5 up until the under 9s. And the 11 versus 11 game was only introduced in the under 14s. The idea of the 2 versus 2 creates a lot more time dribbling with the ball, shooting the ball, which is developing skills, compared to 11 versus 11, where the amount of time with the ball was much more limited, especially for some of those children who may be more standoffish and not go looking for the ball as much. So supposedly the outcry for changing the game in this case from what was traditional football to these minor versions of the game was huge. But we fast forward 20 years and now we find Belgium are producing some of the greatest and most talented players in the world. They've also been ranked number 1 in the world in recent years, and the team is consistently competing at the very top in major tournaments such as World Cups and European Championships. I can see you've got the infograph up now. So what are your thoughts on what Belgium did?
Hockey's done the same in Belgium, and they've pretty much won everything going in the past 5 years, so it says a lot. I suppose my reflection for like grassroots coaches where change could happen is that I wouldn't wait until something goes wrong for it to change the game. I think of course you need something to click and say, okay, we need to change. But that could just be a person to say, this is what we're going to do. And I also believe you should do what's right for the player or the players, and not always what is best and easiest for the adults. So it's easy for adults to say, okay, let's play 8v8 at under 6 because they have to do less work. They could do more shouting because that's what a lot of coaches do. But actually, it's better for the players to play a 3v3 or a 4v4 going into it. And again, I suppose one of the things is that you're not going to see immediate results. And I suppose that's something I'd say with the games-based approach is you're not suddenly going to develop these cool, amazing, adaptive players after doing one game in your session, and then suddenly you're games-based coach. It might just be you build on that week on week and begin to use your games. I think it's Horst Wahn, the German champion, the legend, that's kind of done loads of stuff around this. I think he said the game should fit like a shoe, comfortable but with enough room still to move, which I think is a really nice phrase and says a lot to go on. A quick story over here in Australia, or in Perth, I suppose. The kids still play like 8v8 at under 8, which is scary. It drowns me just thinking about it. So I put I got 3 adults, 3v3, and I put them on an 11v11 pitch. And I said, what are you going to do? And they said, there's loads of spaces to run, like the pitch is huge, and I've got to run from there, and then I have to run from there. And I said, well, that's what it feels like for the kids. Yeah. So I just took six fully grown adults that play hockey and put them on a kids pitch, which would normally be an adult pitch, that would normally be 11v11. And I said, play. And they said, it's too big. I said, well, that's how the kids feel. But you just need to have those experiences to understand what it's like to be a kid and to be a learner.
I think if you look at statistics in terms of 8v8s or 7v7 games of soccer or, rugby or whatever, you'd look at the stats and you'd probably have each player touching the ball 4 or 5 times. If you then take the stats of a 2v2 or 3v3 game, the touches in that game are going to be increased exponentially. So at the end of the day, what's the better result for those young kids or those young players? Is it getting more touches and having more opportunities to develop their skills? Or is it to play a game that's more similar to that traditional adult version that we see on TV? Jack, what's one lesson or tip you would give a coach looking to try a games-based approach?
Good question. I'd probably start with a warm-up, because I think whatever sport you play, you can find a tennis board, you can find an object or whatever it might be, and you could start to just play some freebie-free thumb ball or hand footy sort of stuff in your warm-up. So begin to introduce it slowly. If you're very much a teller as a coach and you solve the problems for your players, begin to become more of a problem setter than a problem solver, and just introduce it in your warm-ups. So it might be just some little 4v4 mini games in a warm-up, and then you go into it, and then week on week you just build in. But I'd always check in with the players, and I'd ask them as well, what are you seeing, what you're feeling, so when I play, or when I played, compared to some of the other guys that played for international level, I don't know what that intensity is like. So when I go and coach someone that's played at that level, I've got to ask them, is the pitch big enough? Is the game long enough? Are we getting enough dynamic out of it? So also asking the players, should we be playing for longer? Should we be playing for shorter? What size pitch should we be going on as well? So checking in with the players to understand that they're getting the intensity and the interactions that they want out of it.
Yeah, nice. And I guess one of the things there you mentioned, or you used the word ask rather than tell. In terms of the way we communicate, do you suggest that we should be more likely to ask questions than using direct instruction and telling people what they need to be doing?
I think so, because it engages the learner. You would never work for a boss in a corporate world or anywhere in the world if your boss never asked you what you thought. You'd last 6 months.
Yeah.
You'd feel quite lonely. But in sport, we do it all the time. We never ask.
Yeah.
But the kids keep coming because mum and dad tell them to go. So yeah, I'd very much ask, but I'd also get the game to ask the questions as well. So I might start with a game that is from a previous topic, maybe the last week, and do a game at the start of the session that is actually checking and challenging the learning that's prior to that.
I'm going to go back to the cards, and I'm sorry that I've sort of got jumping around a bit here because I've just thought of this one. If you're using the cards both in a team environment and you might also be using them individually, as a coach, how do you keep on top or on track of each person's challenge and make sure that you're sort of like monitoring that challenge at the same time?
Yeah, I guess if you've got 20 players, you're not going to give 20 individual challenges. You might just, and in soccer they call it spotlight players or profile players. You might just choose a few players every session that you really begin to focus on. But it might be, James, that if I give you a card, my job as your teammate is actually to check in with you. Yeah. So as the coach, I've given James the card, but I'm telling Jack to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're getting that peer-to-peer interaction.
Yeah.
And that could be on your own team, or it could be on the opposition team. If it's on the opposition team, they're really going to challenge you. They're going to make life really, really hard for you. Whereas if they're on your team, they're going to be supportive, try and make life a little bit easier, help you make the best decisions. Whereas it's going to be highly competitive if you tell the other team exactly what that individual card is.
Yeah, no, I like that idea. That's really good. Mate, just quickly with the MatchPlay cards as a resource, if coaches are interested, where can they get them from? Yeah,
so wherever you are in the world, we can ship them to you. And if you head to thecoachinglab.org/shop, we can get them to you from there. And I think we're up to 36 countries at the moment. So always keen to see where they go and who they get on with.
Nice. Mate, have you got them in, do they come in different languages? So like if let's say Germany wanted to get some, could you have them in German or?
It's good that English is the common language in the world, but a work in progress, and we're not really.
There's something else for you to think about. Mate, Jack, I really appreciate spending the time with me, almost an hour with me today. I've really learned a lot. As I said, I've bought a couple of sets of cards, and just having a chat with you has helped me work out how I can use them more effectively. Like I'd gone through, the pack and thought, oh, this would be really good in this situation. This would be really good in that situation. But then talking to you about how you could use them both as individual challenges, team challenges, having a peer or a teammate helping a player who's got an individual challenge. I think there's some really good ideas, and there's some of the things I wouldn't have thought about. I would have thought about, oh, this is the card, this is how you use it, and then off we go. But hearing you identify some of those other aspects around using them will definitely help. And mate, I've already had about 3 people contact me saying, where'd you get these cards from? Tell me a little bit more about them. So I've said, that we'll be having a chat on the podcast. So there's going to be a lot more information for them. But I've also directed them your way to the Coaching Lab website. In the meantime, mate, thank you so much for coming on and explaining the cards. Is there anything else that the Coaching Lab does that might interest some of our listeners?
Yeah, we hang out with coaches here, there and everywhere, from elite stuff to grassroots, just to help them. So if there's any clubs or schools, teachers or organisations that want a bit of help, want someone different to come in and just have some good chats and give some feedback and share some experiences, we're really keen to do that as well. So whether you're in Australia, in Perth, or anywhere in the world, and Zoom can connect 1 million people nowadays. So yeah, we hang out with loads of different coaches and help them to be problem setters, some problem solvers, and create the best environments for their players.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Awesome. Sounds really good. I'll add all of your website, and I know you're on LinkedIn as Jack Rolfe on LinkedIn. You're on Instagram as @thecoachinglab. Am I correct in saying that?
It is across all social media.
All social media. Awesome. So I'll add those onto the show notes as well. So if anyone's keen to get in touch, they'll have that opportunity.
Wicked. Top man, loving your work, and thanks for the opportunity.
No, mate, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
I hope you've enjoyed the chat with Jack today. Some of the key messages for me in this talk is that Jack has developed the cards to provide both individual challenges and team challenges. As coaches, we tend to focus more on team outcomes and coach the individual less during periods of tactical or game-based training. By incorporating individualised challenges, this can provide more individualised coaching within a game-based setting. Explaining why you may be using a games-based approach to all stakeholders, athletes, parents, and the wider club community may be important to ensure all are on the same page. Often the science behind this approach is unknown outside of the coaching circles, so explaining that we can still tick off skill development, conditioning and so forth, whilst also developing better decision makers, is a useful way to get everyone heading in the same direction. To quote Jack directly, the role of the coach is to create a space and inspire players to be creative. And creativity in sport is often the ability to have more solutions to the same problem. By providing a space where athletes feel comfortable to develop these skills, we'll often harness the best outcomes long term. Finally, if you'd like to find out more information on the Coaching Lab, you can go to thecoachinglab.org or _coachinglab on Instagram or Twitter. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Coach Doctor podcast. Remember to like it and share it amongst the coaching community.